Faith Community Church presents Truth for Today. Is the Bible truly relevant to our lives today? Well, we believe that not only is it relevant, but practical, and most of all, life-changing for those who are truly seeking to answer life's questions.
Tonight on the Jerusalem News Network, the price of sackcloth is skyrocketing as virtually the entire nation of Israel mourns over their sin. We interview local fashion designer John Camelhair to see what could be next in the clothing industry for those who want to repent of their transgressions. Also, is a local mountain goat the next spokesman of God? We talk with its owner and find out the truth behind the animal's prophetic ravings. First, though, we're going on the scene with our man of the hour, Nehemiah, as he and the city of Jerusalem celebrate the completion of the rebuilding of the wall. We have our on-the-street reporter, Jenna Middaugh, with more on this exciting development. Jenna?
Hi, Caleb. Well, yes, it looks like the rebuilding of the Wall of Jerusalem has indeed been completed, and today we're expecting Nehemiah himself to lead the people of the city in a ceremony dedicating the wall to the Lord. And I can hear some music coming from over there. I think the people are pulling out instruments to help celebrate the dedication. I see a harp, a lyre, and some cymbals. And it looks like someone's pulling out some strange contraption that I don't quite recognize. Oh, I can see more clearly now. Yes, it looks like someone has started to DJ the celebration, and they're playing some very strange sounding music, which I don't think is supposed to exist for several more millennia. And it looks like Nehemiah is on his way over here. Let's see if we can get him to say a few words. Nehemiah, care to comment on today's celebration?
Of course, always a pleasure. Well, as you can see and hear, the people are quite excited at the completion of the wall. Not only will it provide us with protection from potential enemies, but today we're going to be dedicating it to the Lord. The builders, who worked tirelessly to make sure that this project came to completion, were really something to see, and God will honor them for it. It's like they say, do everything to the glory of God.
Very poignant words, Nehemiah, but I don't think I've ever heard it said quite like that before. In fact, my producer has just told us that what you quoted was actually said by a man named the Apostle Paul and won't be written down for several hundred more years. What do you have to say about that? Well, I guess it's a day for time travel then. Thank you so much for being here, Nehemiah.
Thank you.
And many people were invited to today's celebration, but one notable absence from the list of invitations was Sanballat, a man that's been causing problems for Nehemiah since he arrived here in Jerusalem. We asked him for a comment, but he refused to make a statement, and he hasn't been seen or heard from on the public stage since the last stone was placed some time ago. Only time will tell whether this rift can ever be healed. Well, it sounds like there will be plenty of celebration here in Jerusalem today as the dedication ceremony continues. And as this epic story of faith and perseverance seems to be reaching its closing chapter, this has been Jenna Middaugh reporting for the Jerusalem News Network. Caleb, back to you.
Thank you so much, Jenna. We'll be back in just a moment with more news here at JNN. Next, we'll be interviewing the creators of a new hit reality TV show in which a certain Persian king is on the hunt for an eligible young bachelorette. Will a new queen be chosen, or will the king of Persia continue to have a vacancy in the throne next to his? You'll have to tune into this week's premiere episode of The New Queen Vashti to find out. My name's Caleb. No, not that Caleb. And we'll be right back.
I love the no quote by Sanballat as he's heading out the doors. How many of you have read chapter 12? Now the people passing out the books are really going to be confused. All these hands, right? Going up. Save that for later. Yeah, what a book. And we have more lessons to glean today. We're talking about godly leaders celebrate accomplishments. And by that, we don't mean our own accomplishments. It's not a pride or vanity kind of thing. We're not saying, yay me. We're saying, yay God. We're not saying, yay us. We're saying, yay Father, for what you have accomplished through us, for what you have done in us. That is what we are celebrating today. When I say celebration, what do you think of? Just think in your head, when we use the word celebrate or celebration, what is in your mind? You think maybe a party? Maybe you think of a birthday party, a celebration. We had one of those in our family this week. Maybe you think of an anniversary. My wife and I had our 35th anniversary last week. We celebrated. Maybe you think of your favorite team winning a game. I was at the Cubs-Brewers game last night. I celebrated, right? And, the night before, the other team celebrated. So you celebrate a home run, you celebrate a good play, you celebrate, when they score. You celebrate, you cheer. So when I think about celebration, I usually think of a more public gathering. Sometimes I think of a volume of loudness. But celebration can be quiet too. It can be corporate, but it can also be private. It can be external and heard and seen, but it can also be internal, where no one but God can see. I want to talk to you this morning about the discipline of celebration. You probably never heard it spoken that way before. You don't think of celebration as a discipline. You think of prayer as one of the disciplines, meditation, Bible study. These are all spiritual disciplines, fasting, whatever it might be, but the discipline of celebration is vitally important and needs to be understood. And I want to start this morning not in Nehemiah 12, but I want to start with another story, very different. One is very public in Nehemiah. It's very large, it's very loud. But there's another celebration that we're going to look at first as a foundation that's very private and very quiet. And you wouldn't think those two stories would have much in common, but we're going to find out that they do. And the story we're going to look at from the New Testament is going to set the foundation for the story we're going to look at in Nehemiah. So let's turn our attention first to the Gospel of Luke, the 10th chapter. It's a familiar story about Jesus going into the home of his friends, Mary and Martha, and of course their brother is Lazarus, who he will raise from the dead. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. This was going to be a respite. This is going to be a place to just take a break from ministering and praying and preaching and relax and be amongst friends and enjoy fellowship. And a gathering together, an intimate gathering in Martha's home. It says Martha opened her home to him, and that's our first clue. Martha opened her home. So Mary lives there, but it's not her home. It doesn't say Mary and Martha opened their home. Understand, Martha is very much the big sister in the story. She's the homeowner. Her little sister Mary lives with her. She doesn't own the home, and she's got certain obligations, certain responsibilities as a privilege for living there that she has to do. And she's going to fall woefully short of those expectations. We're going to find out in this chapter, and there's going to be some consequences to bear. But Martha is in charge. Make no mistake about it. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. I mean, what a wonderful characteristic to be known for. You're known for sitting and paying attention to the Lord when he speaks. She sits at his feet. She is enthralled by his word. She is captivated by his presence. And there's going to be a dynamic, there's going to be a tension between the two sisters as to what's more important. Getting the house in order, preparing the meal, setting the stage for the entertainment they're about to do, or sitting and listening at the feet of Jesus when there's still more work to be done. We're going to find out who wins that tug of war. It says, but Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. In other words, she wasn't listening to Jesus because there was too much to do. There were too many things left undone. Perhaps they came earlier than expected. But for whatever the reason, maybe she put it off too long, but she was distracted. She couldn't focus on Jesus because there was so much to do. And she came to him and asked, first of all, I want you to notice there's some things going on between the lines here. By this point, she is already ready to explode. That means there's some things that did not work. There were some subtle hints that became not so subtle as time went on. There was times when she first would come out and very politely say, Mary, I'm very busy in the kitchen. Could you come and help me? And then she'd go back and Mary didn't show up. And then she'd walk out again and say, Mary, I still need your help in the kitchen. And then Mary would look at her and she'd go, you know? And occasionally she'd look out and catch Mary's eye, maybe roll her eyes, this, come on, you know. And she starts to bang pots and pans just because she's used to being listened to. She's the big sister. This is her home. And now she's being completely ignored. And she is being overwhelmed by the abundance of work. There's so much to do. And she's one person. And she's thinking, I could be done if she would just help me. I could be done if she would just stay with me. And it says she came to him. There was something in the verb in the Greek here that I wanted you to know. It says the verb means to come upon. To come upon suddenly, to come upon forcefully. When she comes out of the kitchen, she comes out of the kitchen ready to explode. She's mad. Because Mary has not caught the hints. She knows, and Jesus has got to know. Jesus has now become part of the problem. And he's going to have to be part of the solution as well. He's got to know. He's heard her raise her voice. He's heard the pots and pans banging. He maybe even has caught an eye roll or two. Or one of these. He's heard them. He's aware of them, but he's doing nothing about it. And that leads to exasperation, where she is going to confront Jesus, and she comes upon him. She comes out briskly, and she comes in front of him, and she interrupts what he's saying and doing. And she accuses him of not caring for her. Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me by myself? Tell her to help me. There's a lot of stuff here, and I know we're on Nehemiah, but we got to touch on some of this stuff. First of all, when somebody says, don't you care, that's pretty heavy stuff. Put that, if a spouse or a child or a close friend, somebody that matters to you, was in peril, and they said, don't you care what I'm going through? That's pretty steep. That's heavy stuff. That means they are questioning your love for them. Don't you care what I'm going through? My sister has left me. And it's in the active tense, meaning she's working a little while, and then she's leaving. She's working a little while, and then she's leaving. Can you help me do this? And she'll come in the kitchen for a few seconds, and she'll leave. And there's still more to do. So she's coming and going, and mostly going. Mostly not there. Don't you care about this? Because, you'd think you would have said something by now or done something by now. You know I've got all that you can see, all the work that's got to be done here. And you know it's just me. Tell her to help me. And that's in the imperative, which means it's a command. None of you have ever bossed around the Lord. I understand that. But some of that crowd at 8:30, they're tough. Those are some old school Christians. They boss the Lord around once in a while. But I know you guys don't do that. God, it's when God doesn't meet our expectations and we think we got to tell him how to do his job. Maybe you've uttered those words, Lord, don't you care what I'm going through? Don't you see what I'm going through in my family? Don't you see what I'm going through in my job? Don't you care? Well, first of all, if you can ask that question of God, that's a sign of a healthy relationship, first of all. Because if you can voice your anger and vent your frustration, that means there's transparency and authenticity. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But there are times we have become disappointed and angry with God because he has not performed. He has not acted like we thought he should. She says, tell her to help me. And Jesus stood up and said, right away, Martha, I'm so sorry. Mary, get into the kitchen and get to work and help your sister right now. No. That's not what he says. He says, Martha, Martha. He says her name twice. What does that mean? There are a lot of places in the Bible where names are said twice. Now, in our culture, it's not necessarily a good thing. Right? If JD doesn't get a slide up for me, I might go after the service and go, JD. Right? You think, oh, you let me down. Or he might go, Pastor Jeff, you told me you were going to, But in that culture, it was intimacy. It was love. It was support. It was care. And so by saying her name twice, he's affirming that he does love her. Because the question was questioning his love. Don't you care about me? Don't you love me? And by saying her name like this twice, there's a gentleness there. He's saying, I do love you. The Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things. This word worry is the word wrap around. It means in her face, you could see the worry. You could see the tension. It wrapped around her whole face. She was consumed right now by frustration and anxiety and anger. And it manifests itself in her countenance, in the way she appeared, and her body language. Many things, but only one is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. What does that phrase mean? You're bothered by many things, but only one is necessary. Let's look at that verse again. Verse 42. You're upset with many things, but only one is needed. I really believe this is both practical and spiritual. I think what he's saying to her is he's looking at the preparations, and he realizes it's overkill. And he's saying, you have prepared many, many things, but you really don't need to do that for us. You're trying to make a spread, like a spread for kings, and that's wonderful. But we'd be okay with just a few things. You didn't have to go through all this work. You're going through needless work. You've overplanned and you're over-preparing. You don't need to do that. Only a few things are necessary. It's nice that you made this great spread, but we really didn't need to eat all this food. Just a few things would have been fine. And then he spiritualizes and he says, but really only one is necessary. There's only one dish that's ultimately necessary, and Mary has chose the best dish. The spiritual food she is receiving. And it will not be taken from her. Mary chose to exercise the discipline of celebration. What do you mean, celebration? It's not a party. No. Celebration, part of celebration is to honor. Mary is celebrating the presence of Jesus in her home and in her life. She's celebrating and focusing on his words and how they are impacting her at that moment. Whatever meal they were going to have is going to long be forgotten after they leave that home. But the words that she took in, the teaching she took in, the presence she takes in at that moment are going to be with Mary for the rest of her life. It was a celebration of the presence of Jesus. It was a celebration of something that didn't happen every day. Food is always here, but Jesus is not. The benefits of food are for a little while. It gives me some energy for a day or two. But then I've got to eat again. But the food I'm receiving from Jesus, it'll nourish me and satisfy me for the rest of my life. That's why Jesus said she's chosen the best dish, and it will not be taken away from her. It's lasting benefit. Martha was a task person, and she goes from task to task to task. Any task people here today? Really can't concentrate till the task is done and move on to the next task? I've got a few words for you today that I want you to hear. I want to tell you a story about it, and we will get to Nehemiah, I promise. 35 years ago, I was reminiscing about when we were married. We went to Colorado. And we went to Estes Park, Colorado, and we went to the Rocky Mountain National Park, and we were on a hike. A bus drove us there and dropped us off. We didn't take our cars, so we were dependent upon the bus getting us back, and the bus was going to leave at a certain time. And so we had to be down the mountain and in the bus to get back to our place by a certain time. But it should have been time enough to see all we needed to see. And we were hiking up a path that was leading to a lake called Lake Hayaha. And I got a picture of Lake Hayaha for you, so you can see it. It took me many hours to get there. Lake Hayaha is a beautiful lake. It's in the beautiful Rocky Mountains. But it is a very difficult hike. It's mostly up, and it's many hours to get there. And when I did it, I was 21. I don't know if I could do it now. It was a difficult hike. And so we were consumed by getting to Hayaha. So I wanted you to see that, so you had a mental picture of our destination. And so as we started our climb, we came to other lakes along the way. Believe it or not, we came to lakes even more beautiful than this. Settings even more beautiful than this along the way. And we'd sit down for a second and we'd go, we got to get to Hayaha. We can't stay here. We got to go. We got to go to the next place. While we were going, we saw a waterfall that was magnificent. And we sat down beside the waterfall, and it just looked like it came out of the rocks. And it was unexpected. It was not on our guide. And here we are. We just sit down on the edge and just watch this water rush. And it was just gorgeous. We're like, wow, this is beautiful. We sat for a while. I said, I could stay here all day. Me too. She said, but you know what? We've got to get to Hayaha. And so we reach another lake. And that's magnificent. But we got to get to Hayaha. We'd hike another hour. We'd say, how much farther to Hayaha? I'd say about another 2 hours. Okay. We'd hike for an hour. The next person, how much farther to Hayaha? About 2 hours. I said that an hour ago. I was like, man, we're never going to get there. We passed by like 4 more lakes, and beautiful lakes. And finally we get to Hayaha. And we sit down, and it's pretty, but we realize that there were some lakes along the way that were even more pretty. We're like, well, I wish we would have stayed a little longer at those other lakes. I mean, this is nuts. Don't get me wrong, it's pretty, but that second lake we saw, that was incredible. That waterfall we saw was incredible. And we sat down for just a little while, and guess what? It's time to go get the bus. We don't have time to linger here. We got to go down and back down the trail and get to the bus on time. Friends, you have hayahas in your life, especially you task-driven people. You're going from place to place and things, and you don't take the time to celebrate the journey along the way, do you? Because you got the next mountain to climb. You got the next thing to do, the next thing to see, the next thing to be. And you don't take the time to pause and celebrate where you are now and what's been accomplished so far. That's what I mean by the discipline of celebration. It's a discipline. And if we're not careful, those moments will pass us by. There's a writer by the name of Ralph Waldo Emerson. Emerson said these words. He says, we are always getting ready to live, but never living. Always in a state of preparedness and hurriedness. The next thing, the next task. We're Martha banging our pots and pans while Jesus is there waiting to meet with us. But we have no time. There's no time to celebrate. There's no time to sit at his feet. There's no time to take in the moment because the future is at hand. The opportunity is now. And so on to the next task. On to Hayaha we climb. Only to get there and find we cannot stay. Because now there's another place we must be and another mission we must accomplish. In Nehemiah chapter 12, there was so much that had been done. So much that had been accomplished. They had built the wall. They had organized a government. They had formed a military. They had rebuilt an economy. And they were repopulating the city. And you could say that really the work had just begun. Because now is the real test. Now we become a nation again. Now we become a people again. Much of the work lies ahead of us. And so we could easily go on to the next task, but Nehemiah, godly leader that he is, says, time out. You know what we're going to do right now? We've been working hard. We've been pedal to the metal. You know what we're going to do? We're going to party. We're going to celebrate. We're going to rejoice in what God has done. There's a lot that's been done. There's a lot yet to do. But we're going to have a moment. We're going to have a day where we look at what is. And we remember what was. And we give thanks to God. We are going to practice the discipline of celebration as a people. Let's see what happened during that period. Turn in your Bibles, please, to Nehemiah chapter 12. And we'll not read all the verses of this chapter, but we're going to read some to give us a feel of that day. It says, at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, the Levites were sought out from where they lived and were brought to Jerusalem to celebrate joyfully the dedication with songs and thanksgiving, with music, cymbals, harps, and lyres. So they're the singers, they're the priests, they're the worship leaders. They're gifted in music. The singers also were brought together from the region around Jerusalem, from the village. So they bring the best. the best singers, the best musicians. Verse 30. When the priests and the Levites purified themselves ceremonially, they purified the people, the gates, and the wall. They purified not only themselves, but they purified the gates and the wall. There was a ceremony where they would take water and sprinkle the water on the walls and sprinkle the water on the gates and pronounce God's blessing and proclaim God's presence, not just on themselves, but on the inanimate objects around them. It was a time of worship. It was a time of celebration, and they would set aside themselves as well. Verse 43. Let's read this together. It says, on that day, they offered great sacrifices, rejoicing because God had given them great joy. You know, we talked about this, that celebration is dedication. Celebration is dedicating yourself. It's setting yourself apart. Celebration is intentional. It doesn't just happen by accident. We plan for it. Whether it's a birthday or an anniversary or whatever it is, you plan for it. So is the discipline of celebration something you plan for. It doesn't just happen. It is intentional. And you're dedicating yourself to God. You're dedicating that moment to God, to seize that moment, to seize that day. But it's also, celebration is also glorification. Godly celebration points to God. And it says, God, you are the source of the blessings that we have and know. You say, well, didn't they do the hard work? Didn't they lift the stones? Didn't they do the hard work? Didn't they form the army? Yes. But God gave them the favor with the king of Persia. God gave the vision to Nehemiah. God gave them the strength and perseverance to work, the ability to know how to organize, to carry things through, protection from their enemies. So God's provision, God's deliverance, God's presence was all around them through this whole experience. And they're saying, listen, you did this. You used us. That's an important part of the celebration I'm talking about. So when you capture that moment and you seize it and you say, God, you did this. You provided this. You gave us this. You're acknowledging the source of your blessing. You're acknowledging the source of your celebration, the founder of the feast. Rejoicing because God had given them great joy. The women and the children also rejoiced. And listen to this verse. The sound of rejoicing in Jerusalem could be heard far away. When you celebrate God, that celebration, that joy is a witness to others that are around you of His presence. I mentioned to you that I had the opportunity just recently to go with my family to the Apostle Islands. We were celebrating my wife's birthday. I won't tell you which birthday it was. But we were celebrating one of her birthdays. And it's a significant one. So, okay, she turned 100. You got it out of me. And don't tell her that. Don't tell her I said that. She's down with the children. But don't tell her that. But she had a birthday. And we gathered together in Bayfield, and one of the highlights was going to be a kayaking trip. And the kayaking trip, the water was choppy. And we got a little behind where we were supposed to be. We were behind schedule. There was another group. We had a half-a-day trip. And so that means there's another half-a-day trip for the company. So they got to get back to headquarters because they got to wash out the kayaks. And then they got to do it all again and get everything ready for the next half-day trip. So they're under a gun a little bit. So we didn't get to see all the sea caves we wanted to see. And as a result, even the sea caves that we did get to see, we were in a little bit of a time crunch. And so, Superior's in charge. So even if it's a pleasant day, you may not be able to kayak because Superior's the boss. And so even though it was a pleasant day, the sea was choppy. And he said, we can't see all the sea caves, but we're going to go this one that I think you're really going to like. And so you paddle out to the sea caves. And what the sea caves are is the Apostle Islands are these big sandstone cliffs. And over the centuries, Superior goes into the sandstone cliffs. And it carves out these sea caves that you can kayak through. And they're magnificent. And so, I wanted our children to experience this. And so you paddle out to it, and you reward your carrot for all that hard work is you get to see this incredible sight. And I've got a picture of myself and my youngest daughter, Lindsay. And you can see at the bottom of the picture is that's me in the hat, and my daughter Lindsay's behind me, and we're the first ones to go in. And he said, "Don't stay long. So we're gonna go in the kayaks one at a time. You go into the kayaks one at a time. Go as far as you can go, but don't stay long, and then come back. And the next one we got to get back to headquarters." And so her and I were the first ones to go in while the group stayed back. And you can see we're heading in right now to the sea cave. And where we're going is, you see where the light is in the back? In the upper left-hand corner, that's where we're heading. We're heading towards that opening. And so we're paddling in there. And when we get to the opening, we pause and we look up. You can't see it, but there is a single birch right on the very edge. And when you get to it, the dew from the forest is dripping down into the water. And you can see all these layers, and you realize how long it must have taken, thousands of years, for this to form. And you're looking at it. We didn't say a lot. I think the only thing I said was, we were looking up, and I said, "Isn't it beautiful, honey?" And she went, "Yeah, it really is. It's incredible." And then it was silence. We just took it in. You know what I chose to do during that brief time? I chose the discipline of celebration. See, celebration can be private or it can be public. It can be corporate and large and loud, or it can be an individual. And it can be very private and quiet. And I'd use that time to just worship, to thank God for the moment. I just tried to think about everything that's happening right now. I'm in Superior in a kayak with my daughter. Right now, my daughter is not married. There's no children. She's still my little girl, living at home in the summers, and she's with me in a kayak. I'm on the water of Lake Superior in a sea cave, and I'm looking up at the forest. I'm looking up at the forest. Catch that. And the forest is dripping down constantly on me. Even though it had not rained, the forest drips down continually, the dew from the forest. And I looked at this magnificent structure, and it's just like, wow, God, you're amazing. I celebrated him. I celebrated his presence. I celebrated that moment. I drank it in. And it's like Jesus said to Mary, "It will not be taken from me." I won't remember the things we ate. I don't remember all the conversations we had or the things we did. But I remember that moment. I'll always have that moment. Because in that moment, I met with God. And God, in chapter 12, is inviting you to meet with him. He's inviting you to those moments of celebration. Well, there's more tasks to do. We've got to head back. We've got other things to do on our vacation, other places to go, other things to see. But in that moment, I pause and I celebrate. And I think about who God is and what this moment means to me. You know, there was a lot of partying going on. There was loud music. There were choirs singing back and forth. They were echoing and singing, interacting with each other, these large, magnificent choirs. And the whole nation singing praises to God. What a magnificent time of celebration. But I guarantee you, when they were done blowing their horns, the confetti was done, the fireworks had all been shot off, and it's time for everybody to go home. And Nehemiah is cleaning up. And he's sweeping the floor, and they're putting away the decorations. I bet you anything, there's reflection. I bet you Nehemiah goes over to the wall and he says, "It wasn't long ago, this was just rubble." And he surveys a wall that's done and it's complete. And it goes on for miles. And he looks inside the city, and when he got there, it was a ghost town. And he looks around and it's teeming with life. Babies are crying. People are moving. Houses are being built. Businesses are being built. And he remembers what it used to be. And he thinks about the joy of the faces of the people as they gathered as a nation to celebrate. We have fulfilled prophecy. We have become a part of history. God used us to accomplish His purpose, and he thinks about their faces, and he thinks about that day. And when he is by himself, after all the speeches and all the songs and all is quiet, Nehemiah celebrates God. He celebrates what they've accomplished, what God has done through him. Still much to do. Other hayahas to explore. Other places to paddle. But for right now, it's just him and God. And God has used him to fulfill a vision and a dream. Friends, I wanted to ask you the question as we close this morning. What about you? Are you more Mary or Martha? Are you taking the time to practice the discipline of celebration, or are you just on task? Well, that's got done. We got that done. That's great, but we got to move on to the next thing. What's the next adventure? Are you taking some time to slow it down and soak it in? It doesn't have to be long, but you soak it in. You soak in the moment. And when you soak in the moment, it will not be taken from you. You celebrate that. You rejoice. Your pastor, you've heard of hellfire and brimstone sermons? Your pastor's up here today commanding you to be happy. I'm commanding you to rejoice in God. Rejoice in His provision. Rejoice in His presence. Rejoice in His provision. Even in the midst of adversity that you might be going through, there are opportunities for you to celebrate what God has done. Yes, there's more to be done. But what's been done so far? What's the progress we've made on the journey? Let's not live like Ralph Waldo Emerson said. Most of us spend our time preparing to live, planning to live, but we never live. Let's live. Let's live. Which are you today? Would you join me in prayer this morning? Father, life is busy. Sometimes it's chaotic. And sometimes, like Martha, we are distracted by so many things, and life starts to overwhelm us. We feel like we're alone, and sometimes we feel like others don't care. Maybe you don't even care what we're going through. Such a moment, you remind us to celebrate. To celebrate in the present. To celebrate what's happening right now. To celebrate the blessings that we know right now. There's always going to be some place to go, something to see. Another place to paddle, another mountain to climb. But here and now, what are you calling us to celebrate? What are you calling us to sit down in the midst of our preparation, or hold on to our paddle in the midst of our paddling? Or stop hiking in the midst of our hike? What are you calling us to ponder and celebrate? To give thanks, to rejoice. It's intentional. It's a discipline that we are called to practice. This week, Lord, as we go about our day, as we go about our week, help us to pause to celebrate you. Whether that's as a couple, as a family, as a church, as a small group, or just as an individual, whatever the case might be. And when we seize that moment, it becomes ours. You sear it into our conscious minds. It becomes a part of our past to such a degree that it affects our future. Mary held fast to those words that were spoken long after the meal was forgotten. Nehemiah remembered that day when the days became difficult once again in the future. Nothing could take away that moment of celebration. We pray these things today. We thank you for this book. We thank you for the lessons of leadership and of life we have learned from Nehemiah. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
We hope you've enjoyed Truth for Today, brought to you by Faith Community Church. If you would like more information about attending our church, please call us at 608-758-2850, or you can visit us on the web at www.faithcommunitychurch.net. We'll see you next week at the same time, and thanks again for watching Truth for Today.